Welcome to Incite Club. Today we're talking about being addicted to feeling bad. Listen in. The first rule of Incite Club is you don't talk about Incite Club. You do Incite Club. The second rule of Incite Club is the only assumptions we make about one another are that we all want happiness and we all want to avoid suffering. The third rule of Incite Club is you check all your other assumptions at the door. We hope these conversations will bring you insights that incite you to action. Welcome to Incite Club.
And you ask yourself, where is my mind? Where is my mind? Where is my mind?
Welcome to Incite Club. Ladies, I have to start with something that's totally unconnected to our topic of conversation. I'm reminded because we just played our theme song. Spotify sent me these are the top artists you listen to. My top number one artist for 2023 that I listened to was Rising Appalachia. And my top number two artist I listened to in 2023 was Lady Skort.
Oh, I'm happy to hear that.
I was happy to hear you all year. So
Thank you.
Just reminded me hearing our theme song and you singing. I was like, oh, how cool is that?
That's really cool. Actually, I just checked mine this morning, and just a side note, I got said that I forgot to send a video that the artist can send to greet the people that got.
Oh yeah, I got a greeting video from Nora Jones because she was like my number 3 or 4. Yeah.
So Rising Appalachia forgot as well. I'm not the only one. Anyway, I forgot to do that. So I keep telling I'm gonna remember in time, but when I checked this year, it wasn't available anymore. But yeah, I need to do that. I really want to do that. Yeah. My top was our new band, 2 weeks. Which, of course, I shameless plug. I listen to our songs.
I love it. Yeah, it makes such a difference to have that. Like all of the music that I've been listening to is really high vibe. My most played song is "Follow the Sun" by Xavier Rudd. You turned me on to his music, but it's like, oh, it makes such a big difference that well, this is actually a great segue. It makes such a big difference the medium we steep ourselves in, like what's playing, what's going on.
The best of good vibes.
Yes. Like is what I'm listening to, is what I'm immersing myself in, inviting me more into love, into compassion, into grace, into possibility, into curiosity. Or am I playing out my addiction to negativity, listening to, oh my gosh, wait, I have this really cool story. When I was at Thanksgiving, one of the people I was talking to, my family's in California, so I was in Northern California, and they had these like terrible winter storms. It was already almost a year ago, or no, I don't know. It's hard for me to track time, but it wasn't recent. So they'd had this bad storm, and the guy I was talking to, a tree had fallen and it downed a power line, and it took a really long time to repair because it was an old power line, and the power company was like, you can't just put that back up. It has to be all this and everything. So for 3 weeks, they didn't have power, and they got a little generator to keep the refrigerator going. But he said the biggest impact it had was he stopped watching the news all of the time. And all of a sudden he became aware of how poisonous that had been. And he's like, I feel like I'm a better person. I feel like I'm a better dad. I feel like I'm a better, business person. And it was really cool to just hear somebody acknowledge that media, was keeping him in a place of always being angry, always being unhappy.
I'm pretty sure my biggest change was when I turned off watching TV news, especially, and one of biggest turning point. But one of the things that you mentioned with the songs now, I started noticing a while ago that I pretty much I have a very unfocused way of manifesting. It's not like I think of I want a blue car and I'm gonna get a blue car. It's not that direct. It's more like I have this idea of this, and then I manifest this idea of this in some shape or form. And I noticed that for people who are more like this, at least for me, the songs that I listen, the movies that I watch, all these things were really like creating stuff in a negative way sometimes.
Mm.
So was one of the things that made me switch the kind of music I listen, at least when I'm listening without paying attention. I can listen to a song that it's not the best, but like I am noticing you and I'm really paying attention to that, and not unconsciously.
I that distinction feels really helpful. What I'm letting seep in and interplay with my subconscious mind versus, oh, I'm listening to this critically, not as in negatively, but like
Yeah,
as if I'm doing a critique, like, oh, that's interesting, and then this is happening. Oh, okay.
not just letting it slide in without you even noticing what you're taking in.
Yeah, in the background.
I can chew it.
I can chew.
Not
Oh my
swallow.
gosh, that's so brilliant. I can chew it. Whoa. Oh my goodness. I mean, what a profound statement, because geez Louise, so much of the food we eat is actually poison. I mean, that as a metaphor, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
And like, whoa, literally, whether we're chewing our food or not is like, what am I consciously letting in? And if I were chewing it and being aware of it, would I want it in my body? Did I ever tell you this ridiculous thing? I was on a road trip one time, and you're like, okay, this is the place where we can stop. Like, this is where we're stopping. These are the food options, right? And I stopped at a Kentucky Fried Chicken, and I'm not saying I don't enjoy Kentucky Fried Chicken here and there, but this was like, I don't think they'd got the 11 herbs and spices. This was like 4.5. This was just like the bottom of the barrel fast food. Like, fast food is already so bad, and this was like, yeah, we just didn't get the supplies. It was so disgusting. And as I was eating, I was trying to not let the food touch my mouth. I was like, how can I eat this without really touching it? Because it was so gross. And I'm like, Megan, this is absurd. This is becoming your cells. You're going to integrate this into your body. You're going to become this piece of disgusting processed chicken. And I was just cracking up because I was like, how can I eat this without touching it?
Oh my. You know, that's something that I can't say for sure, but there are some experiments on this, that if we eat something, consume something, thinking that it will cause us trouble, it's more likely that it will. So when I have no other choice, I'm choosing to consciously think like, okay, I'm going to enjoy this to the fullest. And like I often forget this, but we can put like a mantra or a prayer or something into it. Like ask the food to like feed me. Don't like he's gonna do something bad.
Yes. That
So
would have
yeah,
been a good plan for sure.
I you know I stopped eating like flour and the more processed stuff a while ago, and sugar as well. But eventually, there's like this is what collectively, if you are in a group, we're eating, and
Mhm.
I'm getting better at okay, I can make exceptions, and I can tell my body to use this as fuel and not get any problems with that. And I
Right.
feel like it's working.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, but it's just that feeling of like, I'm letting it in and I'm not chewing it,
Yeah.
is because I don't want to face how this is really making me feel? And yes, it makes sense when we're literally consuming things to bless them and say like, I feel this nourishing me. And as a metaphor, I just think that's so apt that stuff comes in all the time and we're not being with it in honesty. Like, is this nourishing me? Is this serving me? I want to dive into something you talked about before we started recording, because we were talking about this idea of being addicted to negativity. And I had a moment where I was like, I watched somebody kind of like ran out of things in the present to be upset about, and went back like years and years and was like, oh, but I can't believe, that. And I was like, oh, wow, that's, that's from a long time ago. And so it was like just kind of that moment of going, okay, that's that urge to be in negativity. But what you said about it that I find so fascinating is it's a way to numb. So can you talk more about that?
Yeah, I noticed that for myself, and I noticed that on people around me as well. The things that nobody likes to have something that upsets us like in the moment, but the things that happen already happened. So even if it's been just a few days or the same day, it already happened. So it is something certain. You can change. It happened. So we get attached to those things to numb feeling whatever it is, and usually it's connected to anger or and resentment and so on. So we have someone to blame instead of feeling the sadness that probably is causing, instead of connecting to the thing that is feeling, that is hurting, right? Because anger, if we think of the scale of emotions, anger is higher than sadness. So even if it's a bad thing, and also pride, right? So
Mhm.
if I'm feeling proud, and I don't want to let anyone into the thing that is hurting me, and I'm right about this, and this person did this and that and that and that, then I'm feeling higher than if I connect. Actually, I felt really sad about what happened, and I would like that person to apologize, or I would like to explain why this doesn't work for me, and really have to connect in a human level. It's easier to just shut down and numb the feeling with pride or anger.
Yeah. What's coming to mind. So this particular statement wasn't about a personal interaction. It was about politics. And
That also works.
yeah. And it puts me in mind of exactly
That
so exactly what you're saying. It removes the need to take action in the present and to do some examination or to have some self-responsibility in the sense of, I'm putting my faith in this and I'm saying, well, like that thing is so terrible, so this thing must be better. I hope it's better. It's not actually, better. But like,
that's actually a better example, because it's even further from the personal, right?
mhm.
You're focusing on something that bothers you outside of your scope of action. So
Yes.
you can't even do anything. You're not responsible for it. It's easy to talk about. It's easy to disconnect from your present with
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So it
And
is something.
and to put blame on someone you'll never meet, you'll never be able to even send an email to, right? And like that person is, why everything is wrong. Which is kind of what politics all boils down to anymore, right?
Mm.
It's all that guy or it's all that guy. Um, but it's the reason I was so struck by that when you said it is because it seems counterintuitive. Because
Mhm.
if I'm in that addiction to anger, and if I'm pulling things up and like, oh, and then this is something else to be angry about, it seems like, oh wow, you're not numbing, you're pursuing a feeling that's negative. um but it's it's not chewing. You're not chewing the present. You're
It,
slurping up the past.
it's numbing the present moment in our lives. It's
Yeah.
disconnecting from that. And one thing that you said about this, like bringing the past, brought me one thing as well, because Joe Dispenza, the author of Supernatural, Breaking the Habit of Being You, and so on, he says that neurons that fire together wire together. So if we are focusing on one thing that brings anger, for example, it will pull all these other memories that bring anger. If we're focusing on one
Mm.
thing that brought resentment, it will bring all these other things. So it takes us shifting to something that brings us gratitude, for example, to start bringing all the other things that bring gratitude. That's why the gratitude practice is so powerful, even though it's so simple, because it does rewire the brain to focus on something positive instead of something negative.
Mm. Yeah. And it's really identity building
Yeah.
to well, I guess either way, but the piece about staying in anger and finding the other things to be angry about really go a long way to defining I'm right, that person's wrong, that group is wrong, that policy is wrong. Um, and then it shuts down conversation, it shuts down possibility. I had a lot of really neat moments on my recent trip. This was another one, a beautiful one. I was hanging out with this most amazing 5-year-old. Just, I mean, total star seed, brilliant, bright, shining kid. And one of the adults,
I have a
um,
comment. Hey,
oh,
Rich. Good to see you. This is one of our friends from the band.
oh, awesome. Hey, thanks for listening. One of the adults said a word that he didn't know that was a longer word. And I just watched him with all of this open, the word was vocabulary. And I
Mm.
just watched him with all this openness and all this love and all this joy in experience and all this curiosity go, oh, well, let's tap out how many syllables it has. And he went, vocabulary. And I was like, wow, to be that open where you encounter something new, something you don't know, and instead of immediately shutting down in fear, trying to pretend, trying to fake your way through it, getting angry because it's not something you know, you're like, oh, what skills do I have for something new? I can find out how many syllables. I'm like, I am so in love with you, kid. uh, and
Oh,
yeah, like I aspire to encounter things that feel uncomfortable and new with that attitude.
yes. That's the good thing with kids, right? They don't have that block that I don't know. I can't do it. I'm not gonna even try it because I'm gonna embarrass myself. Yeah, if we had more of that, that's related to the trust that I was talking about. Like,
Yeah.
not all of this is related to fear. Kids don't fear that way unless the fear was instilled in them.
Well, we're really good at instilling it in them, and that's pretty much the point of of like a standard classroom education at this
Yeah.
point is what I feel is to erode trust, to create fear, to make you look around and go, are my peers judging me? Am I looking stupid?
Yeah.
Yeah. But say more about trust and say more about trust and anger if those two go together.
Yeah, I do. Let's wire some neurons here. So yeah, we were talking about addiction to bad feelings, and the thing that came to me as you were talking about this, with it being numbing and so on, it's also because it allows us to disconnect to our actual feelings.
Yeah.
So anything that is bringing any vulnerability gets shut down, because like I'm right about the things that I'm saying. I have the right to be angry about this. I have the right to be blaming other people, or like complaining and so on, and all of this it closes even the possibility for us to connect and trust each other, right?
Mhm. And to examine our own assumptions.
The only way for you to connect this way is if you connect uh, through the same way of thinking, and like, oh yeah, you're right about this, I hate that too, and then you're connecting through the hate,
Yeah.
and it will break in any moment that the other person has a thought that doesn't fit with yours because the mind is closed.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm reading a book right now about like influence and trust and all this kind of stuff. And the author talks about Marine Corps training and drill sergeants are kind of famous for being mean and nasty and getting right up in your face and yelling and making you do push-ups. And it's intentional, according to him, because it creates this bond incredibly quickly among all of the recruits. So they have a shared enemy and they know that to succeed, they have to have one another's back. Like, oh, somebody's boots aren't shined. We have to, like that guy didn't make his bed. The It's a way of creating a bond and trust because you have to trust these people with your life. So it's a way of creating that bond and that trust quickly by creating a common enemy. And I was like, I bet there's another way to do that.
This is so interesting because first of all, this actually works, and that explains why there's so many like groups that are like this group is against that group and so on. So the groups bond
Yeah.
around that, countries bond around that, like
Yeah.
cultures bond around that, because it creates that pendulum. Like everyone is against this, so it's easy to connect through this.
Right. And the author makes exactly this point is that it tends to lead to tribalism.
Yeah.
So what's really interesting is that and then also there's this idea of like once you're a Marine and you're bonded that way, then when somebody else is a Marine, you have an instant trust with them, right? Because you're like,
Yeah.
but there's a rivalry between different arms of the US military. So like Marines are down on army rangers or like you know what I mean, there's or I'm not aware, I can't name all the branches. But this branch is in a rivalry with this one and not a real mean-spirited thing, but
Mm.
you watch that tribalism create. So if the bond is established with a shared hatred of the other, then you get this intense tribalism, just as you were talking about. And we have so many, humans coming together in society with trust allows us to survive, allows us to specialize. But coming together, not based on trust, but based on like, hatred of the other, we're always going to get these moments where groups, whether it's as small as a neighborhood or as large as a country, they put down the blast shields and they're like, you're other, you're not part. And as you said, it only takes one thing. Brene Brown, I forget in which book, tells a story about she's talking with her very, very, very best friend in all the world. And they're talking about, oh yeah, and those people and they're not, and those people and they're not right, and they're agreeing on all of the things. And then one of them, I forget which, if it's her friend, says something judgmental, and whoever's, I think it's her friend, says something judgmental, and Brene Brown has to say, actually that's me. And then they have to and that's her brilliance, is being able to step forward in vulnerability. But then they have to have a conversation about like, oh, when people do that, I was making the assumption that that this is what's behind it. And Brene Brown saying, well, no, when I'm doing that, here's what's behind it for me. And they're able to hash it out because they have this shared history and friendship. And also I think they're riding in a car at the time, so they can't escape one another, which helps. But
A good way to have a conversation.
yes, exactly, right? But how rare is that for people to get past that first point of disagreement?
Mm. That's true. This is the main reason why I feel like having that connection based on a common enemy is such a problem, because if the connection is based on that, anything that comes out will create this connection. And also it's an easy way to connect, because if we connect this way, then it's not gonna, you don't have to be vulnerable with that. Like, you just need to be angry about the same thing.
Yeah. And those kind of
It's not a connect.
relationships, if that's all there is to it, they certainly won't be the ones that challenge us, that invite us to grow, that beckon us into our highest expression.
Yeah. Doesn't challenge us.
Yeah.
Because it's that fight for belonging and for fitting into a common thought and a common group, but it's not really creating that bond where I get to be me. I get to be me as long as I fit this group. And if there's anything that goes wrong, then I can't be. So I feel like the biggest challenge to trust more others and to trust more ourselves is to actually bond based on who we are, not based on a shared enemy.
Yeah. It feels like there's a good challenge here, but I'm not sure what it is. Like a good insight,
Mm.
insight moment, but I'm not sure what it is. I had an experience recently where somebody I, generally tend to agree with and enjoy spending time with, and feel like we're on the same wavelength. We got into a topic of conversation where there was a divergence, and I had this like fear in the moment of conversation, and it just was like, okay, my job right now is to observe this,
Mm.
to listen. And it was cool because on my end, I stayed open and was like, I feel the door starting to close, because like, no, that's not okay to think, right? And I'm like, let me just stay open, and not even saying anything, just listening, but staying open. Man, that felt vulnerable. That felt so flippin' vulnerable. And then I started having these thoughts about like, um, well, is it not irresponsible, but like, is it okay if I don't counter that? Like, that's not something I think is true, and I think this different thing. Like, is it okay to just let an opinion I disagree with stand? I'm like, yeah, I didn't die.
Yeah.
I didn't die. And it wasn't an opinion expressed with anger. It
Mhm.
wasn't the kind of situation where somebody's like, yeah, and these people are awful. And you go like, I feel like I can't just sit here in silence. It wasn't a judgment. It was just like, oh yeah, this is the right thing. And I was like, no. But that feeling of being open, it takes energy.
Yeah. It takes, and we were talking about trust. I feel like the fear of, like, lack of trust either in ourselves and in others is purely fear.
Yeah.
And judgment also creates fear. So coming back to, you mentioned oh, maybe there's an insight in here, and I was trying to pull that out, especially when I heard what you said about the conversation that Brene Brown had, and also yours. I feel like the insight, and maybe the challenge for anyone who listens to it as well, is how can I be more uh, confident and not be afraid to express in my relationships
Mm.
what I'm actually thinking and feeling, and not what's going to be more acceptable, or what I think I have to say, or what I think I have to be, in order to fit the situation. That doesn't mean like, oh, I'm gonna pick every fight now, or I'm gonna disagree with everyone, but not doing the white lies or staying quiet when you feel like, I actually want to say something different, but it's not going to be acceptable, or if you are feeling sad about something, then just getting angry to numb out, or yeah, paying attention to where we are acting on the fears and that addiction to what's easy
Mm,
instead of what's true.
yeah. I feel like I'm gonna start on the bunny slope with that. Because for me, the first step was not anything about my own expression, but simply listening openly.
Yeah.
And my takeaway from that conversation was, wow, this is somebody who's really wise, who does a lot of inquiry, but even then, I could see the moment where the fear had kicked in, and that's what was driving the response I was hearing. And that felt really good as an outcome of that conversation. I went, "Oh, my feeling about this person hasn't changed. My sense of their intelligence, my sense of their, like, wonderfulness as a human being hasn't changed." But I went, "Oh, okay. I just witnessed, like, somebody who doesn't have really uh, 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 I kind of have this visual of some of us have our fear triggers spread out like miles away from us. And so it's like if you even start to approach me and say something, then like that landmine goes off and it creates an explosion. And then others of us, they're much farther. So you can like come in with a lot of different ideas and,
Mm.
different experiences. And it's not, there won't be an explosion. And so this is a person who I feel like doesn't have the landmines far out. It's like you don't see, you think, oh, you really are open to lots of things and you don't have assumptions. And I went, I just got to witness where there was an assumption.
Mm.
And, so just like, okay, cool. You're human too.
We all are, right?
That's maybe where I can play and
Mm.
practice. Uh just holding my energy open for other people to be able to have fear, if that makes sense, like to not allow myself to shut down and go into fear if somebody else is in fear. Just hold the
I,
space for them.
this holding space is just the perfect thing. I experienced that a few months ago. I had a moment where I out not out of my will, but out of the environment I was in, I ended up watching more news than I'm used to, which is never. And I felt myself going into fear, and I felt myself seeing those catastrophic uh, images of things. Maybe you even remember because I mentioned some things. And after a while, I actually, when I got back to my normal, I noticed, oh, okay, that was the effect that news has in everyone. But now I'm aware again. So I'm
Mm.
not paying attention to it. But there's one thing that I learned other than paying attention to what I'm paying attention to with that. Um, when people are in that fight or flight mode and like focusing on the worst and talking about all the problems, having someone that can just listen without judging and without trying to say like, at least you can do that, or trying to, oh, let's you can fix it this way and so on, actually helps, because anything when someone is triggered will trigger more problems.
So it's giving them that chance to like move the adrenaline through their body.
And to fight someone that they can actually fight, because when the thing is so far out, you can
Mm,
fight the government directly usually, or fight something bigger than you like that
yeah,
directly. So even people who are fighting God, they can't fight God directly. So
yeah.
if they can find someone that will create that opposing, even if it's not like I think the opposite of you, but even if it's just like I'm actually not fighting with you, it's enough to, oh, now I have someone to fight. I have somewhere to direct all my angry energy.
Like getting somebody to push on a wall.
Yeah.
Huh. That's interesting. Yeah. It's helpful for me too to just remember how inundated we are and how our like the war for our focus is so intense. It's so intense. And to have compassion for myself, for others, when I'm like, oh yeah, there's the assumption, there's the being pulled into the negativity. It's being programmed continually. It's being continually programmed. I shared with you my strategy for like looking at people and trying to see the baby in them.
Mm, yeah.
Every human came into this world as a little baby with their only desires being like to have their needs taken care of. You know, their only desire is like, I just want to not suffer and I want to have food and feel safe and, you know, be taken care of. And for us primates, you know, it's like, and feel like I'm being held and I'm not going to fall out of the tree.
Mm.
So just using that as I told you I was walking to my neighborhood and I just saw some of my neighbors, and just because of the way they were dressed and the way they were walking, I made like a laundry list of assumptions. I immediately categorized them and were like, oh, this is this and this and da, 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 da. You know, I would have tried to tell you like, this is the news station they watch and the sitcoms they enjoy and the foods they eat, like from a split second.
Mm.
So just noticing that assumption, it's like, can I see the babies in them? Can I just go back to where can I connect with the human in that person who just wants to live a good life. One of the just most inspiring people I follow on Instagram, her name is Julie Bogart, and she homeschooled her kids, and now she creates curriculum for homeschooling, and specifically around writing, which is how I started following her. Her company's called Brave Writer, and she talks a lot about critical thinking. She has a book about critical thinking, and she made this really like so obvious, but not until I heard it point, which was that no one thinks they're working for a worse world. Right? Nobody's walking around. There aren't really villains with white cats who are like, I know, this will make everybody unhappy. Like everybody who's putting forward a policy or an invention or a company or whatever, they think it's going to make things better in some way. Now, maybe they only think it's going to make things better for themselves, but let's take it to the level of, you know, just trying to argue with somebody from the point of view of, well, you're just evil by definition. You're not going to get anywhere. But if you can start with some common ground that's like, well, how do you see, she had this great language that I won't get exactly, but it was like saying to somebody, okay, well, how do you see this? Like your idea, how do you see this as making the world a better place? And give somebody an opportunity to answer that. And then you can engage with like, okay, but you know, if you want this outcome, can you connect the dots for me? Because I don't see how doing this is gonna bring that about. And then you're talking about, you know, strategy or like, will that actually work? As opposed to you obviously just, you know, hate people and want everybody to suffer. And
That's
I'm
brilliant.
like, yeah, right. I'm like, can we elect her to some office?
I love that. Actually, that could be used even with like within our circles with kids, for example. Yeah.
Oh, to like respond to behavior that you're like,
Yeah. How
dude,
do you see
that's
that
that's not
making,
helpful. Yeah.
yeah, making your life better, making the home better?
Yeah. I see you punching your brother. How do you feel that's gonna make things better?
I'm helping you educate.
Yeah.
Could be.
It's a powerful question, and what was fascinating was to see the number of angry comments in response to her post, right? And people saying, "Are you saying that, when somebody is violent and angry and promoting hatred, that we should just, not challenge their ideas?" And it's like, everybody thinks they're right. You're not going to make any progress if the argument is which of us is right.
It would be brilliant if she had like someone to, because probably if it was a lot she wouldn't do that, but if she had someone to answer to every one of those comments saying, how do you see your comment making the world a better place?
Yeah. Well, I guess
So cute.
that's a really important point because we talked about, like I was mentioning, this 5-year-old who was in that place of wonder and curiosity, and so he was able to learn and take something new in. And you were talking about trust, which I think is also a prerequisite for learning and taking new things in. And one of the biggest challenges around anger is because it shuts off vulnerability, it shuts off our ability to learn something new and to hear. And so there just are times when it's not the right time. It's not like that information is not going to be heard. And then the challenge with being on the internet is you're probably never going to encounter that person again. It's not like when you have a fight with a friend and you storm away and then you come back later and say, okay, I've calmed down. Now I'm ready to hear what you were saying. It's like
Yeah.
one point of contact.
Yeah, it's an easy way out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Different than but that goes along with what we talked about, uh, what is needed when someone is ranting or like anger and afraid of something, that it is that space of like just holding space, just listening. If you are a friend, of course, nobody on the internet needs to be just listening to those, but it goes along with that, because if the person is angry, it's not open to any of the, oh, let's fix it, at least it's not a moment for it. You can try to talk the other morning probably,
Yeah.
but not in the heat of the moment. It just makes things worse.
Yeah. So holding space, including knowing when to say, okay, not right now. Yeah, my insight, well, what I would like to work on, what I like to practice is noticing when uh, 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 I'm internally shutting down, like triggered by hearing something, and then I'm like, well, bring it when I'm allowing somebody else's assumptions to just make me double down on my assumptions.
Yeah.
And I think for now, really, it's just an internal practice that I want to hold space internally and go like, can I just allow that without reacting in anger, even inside? Bless you.
Thank you. I muted my microphone.
I was like, dude, you have the quietest sneeze of anybody I've ever heard.
It wasn't quiet.
What's your big insight, or what's your insight?
Well, there was a bunch of insights, but actually I was catching myself on this because what I just said about the holding space, you mentioned that you were in the rabbit. What was the word that you said? Anyway, going slow with this. I feel like sometimes I
Oh,
go
the bunny slope.
the
Yeah,
bunny,
that's
the
like
bunny
the steep slope for kids where it's like very
yeah,
not steep. Yeah.
yeah, bunny rabbit. Anyway, you got me. Um, and I was thinking, oh, maybe I need to take a little bit back on some of the things as well, because just because I noticed that we get triggered about things, and then we get to anger because of numbing and so on, that doesn't mean that I'm allowed to mess with the person that is feeling that way in the moment that they are that. So maybe it's good for me to also like, yeah, okay, let them have their moment and talk later, because sometimes I can be like, uh, are you noticing what you're doing? And then I just make things worse.
Yes.
So yeah, that I think that's my practice for the week, to like be able to hold that space without feeling like I'm not saying what I'm feeling, or I'm not expressing, but I'm actually just doing this out of care and respect for someone, instead of going directly into creating more problems and talk in the right moment.
That's profound. There's a different kind of silence in feeling afraid. I can't say it. It's not. It won't be accepted. Versus, I don't think what I want to say is going to be heard right now. A friend of mine told me that
I'm gonna be helpful.
somebody like cut her off in a parking lot, or whatever, was like real angry and aggressive toward her, and she drove after him going, love and light, love and light, love and light. And I said, I don't think that had the desired effect. Like, because he was in that anger. So from his point of view, it was
Probably
just like,
not.
you're engaging in more road rage with me. And we just cracked up
What
about
kind of spell are you putting in it?
yeah. So it's like your
Ah,
intention of love and light, it could
it
seem like,
won't land.
yeah, like road rage to somebody else if that's the space they're in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I
That
like
sounds
it.
like a good plan.
Yeah. Spaciousness. I feel like most things could be solved with more spaciousness.
Maybe yes. Hmm.
Just give it like, yeah, a little room before we react.
Yeah. I think you can close on that. I've been playing the intro at the end, but I think we need an outro
We need an
instead.
outro. We could just
Yeah.
dance. We could just have a dancing outro.
Yeah. Or
Thanks for
just
listening, everybody. Drop
thanks
your
everyone.
comments. Let us know your
Bye.
big insight, and if you're going to do any of these insight practices with us. And we'll catch you next time.
Catch you next time.